The little girl tore free from her father's hand so suddenly that the silverware on nearby tables rattled as chairs scraped back. Her small sneakers slapped against the black and white tiled floor of the diner, her curls bouncing wildly as she ran straight toward a man she had never met. The entire restaurant seemed to freeze. Her father's voice cracked as he shouted her name, his polished composure shattering in front of a room full of strangers. But before anyone could stop her, she threw her tiny arms around the man's waist, buried her face into his jacket, and whispered the words that drained all color from his face. "You smell like mommy." If you believe every story hides a lesson waiting to be discovered, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Stories. Sometimes the smallest moments reveal the deepest truths, and this is one of those stories. The diner had gone completely silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator behind the counter and the soft hiss of bacon cooking on the grill. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest, heavy and impossible to ignore. Ethan Cole, the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the country, stood frozen near the entrance, his expensive tailored suit suddenly meaningless against the raw panic spreading across his face. He was a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, a man whose sharp mind and colder reputation had earned him both admiration and fear. But none of that mattered now. In this moment, he was simply a father watching his 7-year-old daughter cling to a stranger as though she had found something she'd spent years searching for. Lily was autistic. Her world was one of carefully built routines, familiar patterns, and boundaries no one crossed without consequence. She didn't hug strangers. She didn't make sudden contact. Loud noises often sent her retreating into herself, and even the soft brush of another person's hand could overwhelm her. Ethan had spent years learning the exact rhythm of her needs, the fragile architecture of her comfort. Since her mother's death 3 years earlier, he had built his entire life around protecting that delicate balance. Which was why what he was seeing now felt impossible. The man she clung to looked just as stunned. He stood stiffly beside the counter, his hand halfway around a coffee mug, his breath shallow and uneven. He couldn't have been older than 35. His dark coat was worn at the sleeves, his shoes scuffed from use, his hair slightly unkempt as if he'd spent the day running his fingers through it. There was something rugged but gentle about him, the kind of face that seemed carved by hardship yet softened by quiet endurance. He looked down at the child wrapped around him, his expression shifting from confusion to something much deeper. Recognition, pain, memory. The waitress, Anna, knelt nearby, her name tag catching the warm diner lights as she instinctively reached toward Lily but stopped herself. She knew the girl well. Ethan brought her here every Thursday evening because this little roadside diner was one of the few places Lily tolerated. The red vinyl booths, the familiar smell of fresh pie and coffee, the exact same chocolate milkshake served in the exact same frosted glass, it was safe here. Predictable, controlled, and yet tonight, everything had changed. Ethan crossed the floor quickly, every muscle tight with alarm. He reached for Lily carefully, speaking softly, trying not to trigger panic. But she held tighter to the stranger, her tiny fingers gripping his coat as though letting go would mean losing something precious forever. Then she looked up at him with those enormous blue eyes inherited from her mother and said it again. "You smell like mommy." The words struck Ethan harder than any blow ever could. Because his wife, Claire, had worn a very particular perfume. A soft jasmine scent layered with vanilla and cedarwood, custom made by a tiny boutique perfumer in Florence during their honeymoon. She had worn it every day. It lingered on their bedsheets long after she left for work. It filled the nursery when she rocked Lily to sleep. For months after the funeral, Ethan had kept one of her scarves sealed in a drawer because it still carried traces of it. No one else should smell like that. The stranger slowly crouched down until he was eye level with Lily. His voice was rough, almost trembling, as he gently asked how she knew that smell. Lily didn't answer right away. She rarely responded to direct questions, especially from unfamiliar people. Instead, she reached up with one small hand and touched the faded leather cord hanging around his neck. Tucked beneath his shirt was a silver pendant. Ethan felt his blood turn to ice. He knew that pendant. Claire had owned one exactly like it. The diner blurred around him as memories rushed forward with brutal clarity. Summer evenings on their porch. Claire laughing as sunlight caught the pendant against her collarbone. The way she absent-mindedly twisted it between her fingers whenever she was nervous. His voice came out hollow when he asked the stranger where he got it. The man hesitated. For a moment, it looked as if he might walk away. Then he slowly removed the pendant and held it out. Inside was a tiny photograph. Claire's face smiled back at them. The room seemed to tilt. The stranger introduced himself as Daniel Mercer. His hands shook as he explained that Claire had been his older sister. Ethan stared at him, unable to process what he was hearing. Claire had told him she was an only child. Or at least, that was what he had always believed. Daniel's story unfolded in fragments, each piece hitting Ethan like another wave. They had grown up together in foster care, separated when Claire was 16 and adopted by a wealthy family who gave her a new life, new opportunities, and one condition: complete severance from her past. They had promised her stability, education, a future she could never have imagined, but only if she left behind everything connected to the broken system she came from. She had tried to keep contact with Daniel for years in secret. Letters, hidden phone calls, small gifts, then eventually, silence, not because she stopped caring, because she had gotten sick. Claire's cancer diagnosis had come quickly and brutally. By the time Ethan knew the full extent of it, she was already fading. She had spent her final months trying to shield everyone she loved from pain, even carrying the burden of unfinished truths. Before she died, she had searched for Daniel. She had found him. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and removed a folded, weathered letter. Claire's handwriting. The sight of it nearly shattered Ethan. She had written it 2 weeks before she passed, asking Daniel to come find them when he was ready. She wrote about Lily, about Ethan, about how much she regretted letting fear and circumstance keep her brother hidden from the life she had built. She had enclosed a vial of her perfume, telling him that if Lily ever met him, perhaps she would somehow feel the connection words could never explain. Daniel had carried that vial ever since. Tonight was his first attempt to gather the courage to come. And somehow, impossibly, Lily had known. Ethan sank into the nearest booth, every carefully constructed wall inside him collapsing. For 3 years he had carried grief like armor, sharp and impenetrable. He had focused on survival, on routine, on keeping Lily's world intact even as his own had fallen apart. He had never imagined Claire had left behind one final bridge between their broken pieces. Across the diner, Lily was still hugging Daniel, calmer than Ethan had seen her with anyone in years. For the first time since Claire's death, Ethan saw something in his daughter's face that had been missing for too long. Peace. Weeks turned into months. Daniel became part of their Thursdays at the diner. Then their Saturdays at the park. Then quiet evenings at home where he helped Lily assemble puzzles while Ethan watched from the kitchen, a strange warmth filling spaces that had long gone cold. He told Lily stories about her mother as a little girl, how she once climbed a tree to rescue a frightened kitten and got stuck herself, laughing the whole time. How she used to dance barefoot in summer rainstorms. How she smelled like jasmine because she believed scent was memory's strongest anchor. Lily listened with wide, solemn eyes. And Ethan listened too. Each story hurt, and healed. If this story has touched your heart so far, comment below with one word: memory. Sometimes a single word says everything we cannot. One rainy Thursday nearly a year later, Ethan stood outside the diner watching through fogged windows as Lily laughed, a bright, unguarded sound he thought he might never hear again. Daniel sat across from her, helping her stir whipped cream into her milkshake while Anna smiled from behind the counter. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel Claire's absence as an open wound. He felt her presence, in Lily's laughter, in Daniel's quiet kindness, in the scent of jasmine drifting faintly from a pendant resting against his chest. Some losses never leave us. They simply change shape, becoming something softer, something we can carry instead of something that crushes us. If this story made you feel something, hope, sadness, or even the memory of someone you miss, take a moment to like, share, and tell us your thoughts below. Stories connect us in ways we often don't realize. As Ethan stepped inside and the bell above the diner door chimed softly, Lily looked up and smiled at him. The kind of smile that held no fear, no confusion, only certainty. And in that ordinary little diner, under warm yellow lights and the scent of coffee and pie, he understood what Claire had been trying to tell him all along. Love doesn't disappear. Sometimes it simply waits for the right moment to find its way home.